Welcome to the Cottleville Weldon Spring Business Accelerators podcast. I am your host, Tammy Hilton. I own and operate a Mellow Mushroom franchise in Cottleville, Missouri, and I'm a proud board member for the Cottleville Weldon Spring Chamber of Commerce, and super excited to be your host on today's podcast. I had the opportunity last week to meet and interview Doug Allen. Doug Allen is also a franchisor. He owns a handful of MaidPros. He also is a CPA and has worked in public accounting for many, many years. And him and we met actually at a Coffee and Connections a couple weeks ago and really had a long conversation about budgeting, which sometimes can be one of those conversations where you really enjoy or it can be a difficult conversation. And so once I found out he was a CPA, I started digging in and asking him some questions because I thought, what a great asset he is and how much information he could possibly share with me. And so I asked him to participate in the podcast and maybe share some tips that he could provide and give us a little bit of rundown of how to set a budget and how to start managing our P&L a little bit better. One of the favorite takeaways that I had from the podcast, and I've been thinking about it over the past couple of days, is how our P&L tells our business story. And I always felt confident about using storytelling when it came to sales and how it comes to really just building your image and your brand. And I just thought how interesting that your P&L can also tell your story. But it's so true. If we think about the past couple of years and what we faced post-pandemic, increased labor costs to us. Some of it might be shortages in labor. So maybe we had a decrease in labor, but we started paying more for our employees. Minimum wage continues to go up in the state of Missouri. It just went up again to $12.30 in the state of Missouri. And then also all of our cost of goods skyrocketed over the past couple of years. So I think it would be very interesting if you look back at corresponding P&Ls and think about, what does my P&L story look like? And does it resonate with what was going on in the big picture, right? If you're not meeting with your accountant or you're not meeting with a CPA on a regular basis, maybe perhaps after listening to this podcast, you might look at that a little bit different. So take a listen, subscribe, let me know what you think, and enjoy.
This episode of the Business Accelerator podcast is brought to you by Been There, Dumped That St. Charles County and financial advisor Julio Mendez with Ameriprise Advisors.
Well, listen, I appreciate you joining me on this podcast. I'm really excited to kind of talk about budgeting. It's one of those conversations that nobody likes to talk about, but everybody needs to. Whether it be yourself or in your business. And you and I had met just more recently at First Friday Morning Cup, I think at Public Schoolhouse, right? And Yep. We had gotten into a conversation about budgets. As a business owner, I've been really focused on this year trying to refine my budget and try to figure out the formula. It's just a simple math problem. Maybe not simple, but it is a math problem. Tell me a little bit about your background. I know you're a CPA as well, but you're also now a business owner. So give me a little bit about how that transitioned.
So I worked large public accounting firm, and then kind of from there went corporate. And so I've seen a little bit of what it's like at a public accounting firm, working for a lot of different businesses, but then also being honed in for just that business. But I think I've got some entrepreneurs in my family a little bit, and that kind of was always in the back of my mind, but I never really thought I wanted to be in the small business world. I liked what I was doing in public accounting and seeing the very large companies that I worked with. But through that, I think what really started the journey was while I was there, I got put on some private equity companies as my clients. And what I saw through those private equity companies was there were a lot of quote unquote small business, in that realm. The small business was still, 15, 20, $30 million a year.
Right.
But a lot of the times these entities were something that wasn't I'll say the quote unquote sexy business. It wasn't the Anheuser-Busch's that everybody wanted to be on. And it showed me that money can be made in so many different realms. But when you to your point of budgets, when you get to those types of business in the Anheuser-Busch's of the world, and I'm just using that as an example, being large, their budget is much more fluid. It can, they can have lavish parties and they can have, bring in food all the time. Well, then when you get to the smaller entities of the world, trying to pull things together for a Christmas party sometimes for your employees can seem daunting. Month's profit for, a party.
Yeah.
It's not as easy. So I think that's where it started and got me to. And then you just start seeing a much more strong sense of how cash flows affect every day. Small things as when you swipe that credit card, does it make a difference that you're not going to see the funds in your account for 3 to 4 days versus tomorrow? And
So
things like
true. So true. I always think about how our banking system is so slow. I don't know. I've got a lot of theories on that. And well, it's very interesting what you had mentioned about working on private equity. So, because I'm a little bit familiar with that, but I understand it as a whole. So when you're being absorbed by a private equity firm, that firm does not care about the Christmas party anymore, right?
Nope.
So all they're doing is what? They're skinning down that budget and making everything, they're trying to get to a larger bottom line. So
I've recently just been on the opposite side of that with my MaidPro entity. It was recently, within a couple of years now, purchased by a private equity company. And you're exactly right. I saw it from the accounting standpoint when I really didn't have a dog in the fight other than working with the records.
right.
And that's what we saw firsthand was, they kind of came in and started slashing expenses.
Yeah.
And a lot of times expense slashing starts with employees at the higher level and replacing, you had a home office of 25 people that becomes 5.
Right. Right.
So you're
We
right.
always talk about that suite. It's like 2 years, 3 years, right? And then it gets resold to something else. And it makes sense when you're looking, if you've been in a position where you've been able to look for businesses, it's 2 or 3 years of healthy financials, right?
Yeah.
And so that it makes sense on what they're doing. And so, well, you probably have a lot of experience then on improving budgets, if I could guess.
That's kind of my wheelhouse.
Yeah. And that, I think that's super valuable what you do today. But then as we kind of jump into 2024, we're 2 days into it already, about 2 weeks into it once this airs. What are some practical pieces of advice that you can give, or maybe we can even start with fixed assets and variable assets and just talking a little bit. I think most of us kind of know ideally what they are, but what can we manage inside of those areas?
I think a lot of it comes down to, I'm going to say, like research and development. So I myself, I do a lot of acquisitions. And, like you said, starting even from like just the very fixed cost, right? One of the first things I do when I'm doing an acquisition is I got to have an office in wherever that location across the country that I'm looking at. Sometimes it's in my backyard and I know what a going rate for a office space lease is, right? Kind of before I dive into giving an offer to anyone or anything like that, I certainly ask them for their, as you stated, their financials to kind of give me a picture of what their last couple to 3 years looks like. But then that's what I start looking at. I'm in a service business. So for me, kind of the two main things are, that rent space for the price. I see what they're currently paying. I look at how much longer they have on a lease if I was having to overtake that, or if I'm going to have to instantly start looking for a new space. But I kind of just spread out and start looking, is what they're paying, is that low? Is it high? Where does it fall? I start just putting feelers out there, trying to find how much it is going to cost for that line. And then kind of start doing the same thing and doing just a little bit of research on employees, right? I mean, it's the employees fall more variable, but you got to know, in St. Louis, it might be $20 an hour for your specific industry. And if you go to California, that might be 35,
Yeah.
So those are kind of two of the very first things I start looking at to see, and then comparing them back to what the current, owner and what they've got on their books, what they're paying, what's their struggle? They're looking to get out for a reason. So what's their struggle? Are they just, sometimes they've just had it with employees, right? Some people just, the stress that comes with managing people can be high. So
Yes.
people, it doesn't matter how much, even if they're making a lot of money, that stress, there's not a price
Still a
that
struggle. Yeah. I mean, it can be very damaging. It's very hard. I don't think people see that side of it and they always think it's glamorous and you have the time off or you have the flexibility. But when you don't, you don't, And so, but I hear that because I feel like I'm seeing a lot of businesses recently. I think post COVID, they've been in business 10, 15 years, kind of throwing in the towel, like this was not worth it, or we did what we needed to do and let's move on. So do you think there'll be more opportunities for people if someone's interested in getting into business, perhaps, that there might be some opportunity this year and as people kind of make changes and we're going in through a different cycle, a different season, I think, in the economic world. What are your thoughts?
I definitely do. I think, with the economics changing and everything like that, it's going to heighten that feeling because as things get tighter, if somebody was already on that, anytime you're managing people, you're always going to have that feeling like, oh, this is difficult. So now as we get into an economic time that continues to crunch a little bit more and people aren't, they're sometimes seeing less of a profit. Now that's going to be heightened. So I think, there is going to be that opportunity that people are going to, like you said, want to throw in the towel,
Right.
or they're getting pulled in other ways. So they're going to want to get their capital back out of whatever they've, either invested or whatever they've built to try to, pull out an investment. So I do think I think there's always going to be opportunity. One of the things I look for kind of to your step there to balance myself on that is I always want to buy more of a investment than a job.
Yeah.
So I'm not looking for, can I buy these so that I can run them in the day-to-day sense? I could obviously make a lot more profit if I'm my main employee to a point. I'm not going to be able to grow the same way if I'm the main employee.
Well, it's always
So
about scaling, right? Yeah. Yeah. And that has always been, I don't know, some of the feedback, even talking with my husband and I just about business ownership. Like if you're making the pizza, Tammy, you can't make two at the same time. You have to scale. And so it's hard because like you said, like I could be a very cheap pizza maker. I could be a very inexpensive general manager. But it doesn't give you the ability to scale and really slow down kind of to speed up a little bit and really be more operational working on my business instead of in my business per se. And that's been a difficult part, I think. And a lot of us, you want to be hands-on because people want to see you, they want to go in and, know that they can call you, if they have a question or they're needing a quote, about getting their residence or commercial properties cleaned. They want to talk to you.
Been There, Dump That, St. Charles County is a residential-friendly dumpster rental company that works with homeowners, contractors, and anyone who needs a dumpster in St. Charles County and surrounding areas. Dumpsters are clean, well-maintained, and easy to operate, which you'll notice is unlike other dumpster rental companies. Reach out to Been There, Dump That, and they will gladly take the time to understand what your project needs. Reserve your dumpster today. Call 314-948-5988 or email stlouis@beentheredumpthat.com.
I don't know if there's a lot of business owners that really live to a budget. And I think like as I'm kind of looking at my business this year moving forward, I always think like there's so many things I just cannot control. You just got to pay the bills.
Yep.
If something breaks, you have to fix it, and so what do you do to when do you get to be able to say like, we don't have the budget for that? Like where are some areas where you can say it's not in the budget this month that you can move it to next month or not do it at all?
I think to an extent, where I do it personally is with some kind of employee areas, putting it out there with them to kind of get them to feel invested. So